Okay,
All
go
right.
ahead.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming to today's meeting from the county's FY27 Spending Affordability Advisory Committee. This is our fifth meeting. As we step into the month of February, as we mentioned earlier, that we actually are transferring more from information gathering to certain presentation and discussion more directly related to some core charge of the committee. As you recall, the committee is charged by county executive to provide critical recommendations for county government, primarily the GO bonds, general obligation bonds authorization ceiling, next year's revenue projection ceiling, and also the multi-year projection, as well as anything else that the committee feels important to secure the county's long-term financial health. So for today, we're mostly concentrated on debt and capital. So we're very fortunate to be able to invite our financial advisor to provide a presentation on the county's overall credit rating. Thank you, Dan, for joining us. And following her will be a presentation from our finance team led by Rafi, our finance director, about the county's overall debt situation and trend. And after that, if time permits, I will provide very quick brief overview about the capital project overall, because that's all connected. So with that, I will hand it over to Jen. Thank you.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Jennifer Derrickson. I am a Senior Vice President with Davenport & Company, financial advisor to the county. And prior to my becoming a financial advisor, I also worked for Moody's Investor Service, one of the rating agencies, and actually rated the county while I was there. So if you give me a second, I'm going to just put up my presentation. Hopefully everyone can see this.
Yeah, it's good. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. So today, I just wanted to start off and give you all a credit rating overview, talk about, what is a credit rating, why they're important, and then move into some specifics about the county's rating in particular, and just the credit rating universe in general. So, what is a credit rating? A credit rating measures a government's willingness and ability to pay debt on time and full. Credit ratings are used by investors looking to buy bonds to decide whether or not they want to purchase those government's bonds. The higher the rating, the less risk that a default or, not paying your debt on time or in full will occur. Positively, the county holds the highest ratings, AAAs, from all three national rating agencies. The county is only one of 54 counties, so that puts you in the top 1.7%. So a very distinguished designation. Achieving a AAA is definitely hard to do and something to be proud of. And it really signals that the county is fiscally responsible and functioning at the highest level when compared to other county governments across the United States. Having three AAA ratings does provide the county with the highest market access. So if you needed to issue debt, you have the ability to do that, and you benefit from getting the lowest borrowing cost. The higher your rating, the lower the interest rate on the debt that you're going to issue. So, since you are able to achieve a lower debt service, that helps in terms of budgetary flexibility. If the county was to be downgraded, while it is hard to, achieve the AAA rating from all three rating agencies, it's even harder to regain a AAA once it's lost. And that can take years, if at all. And if the county were to be downgraded, obviously that would have an impact on the interest rates that the county would get for its debt borrowings, and could limit budgetary flexibility and impact the amount of projects that the county could fund due to the higher cost of debt. The rating agencies, instead of, just outright downgrading a lot of times will put local governments on what's called a negative outlook. This outlook signifies that they will be watching the credit for the next 12 to 24 months to see if that local government addresses any rating concerns that they've pointed out that they want to see. If that local government is able to address those concerns, then perhaps they take the negative outlook off. If not, then a downgrade would likely happen.
Real quick question. I'm sorry, Jennifer.
Of course.
This is Todd. We've heard this for several years, and I'm just curious, what's the basis point differential as you go down notches in the rating process?
I would say, between the AAA and the AA level, I would say right now around like 5 basis points, but that can change as the market changes. Sometimes that spread is greater than that, but right now I would say about 5 basis points.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, not a problem. So in terms of the county, as we look at the county's fiscal 25 audited results that just came out about a month ago or so, there is potential downward rating pressure on the county's Moody's and S&P ratings in particular, and that's really due to the spend down in reserves that has occurred in both fiscal 24 and 25 for one-time items. And there is another planned spend down planned in the budget in fiscal year 26. And so those two rating agencies in particular will be looking at, those reserves, as well as across the board, they're concerned about the fiscal impacts from the federal workforce reductions. So, as we go through this, as you think about the fiscal 27 budget, any use of reserves, and you'll see, we'll look at some peer comps, will be important to the county's rating trajectory and, maintaining these AAA ratings. So before we get into sort of the specifics, I just wanted to give you an overview of sort of the 4 main factors that the rating agencies look at in their credit ratings. The first is economy. So they look at the diversity of the county's tax base, the tax base growth, as well as, population growth and other wealth level metrics. Obviously, the county has scored extremely well in this particular rating category, and is expected to continue. In terms of finances, the rating agencies look at both reserves and liquidity, and they look at that historically and then also future projections. They're looking, ratings are forward looking, and so they are interested to understand where reserves are expected to go in the future years. They also want to make sure that issuers have adopted reserve policies and ensure that reserves are in line with other AAA rated counties in Maryland and across the nation. I will say reserves are the single most important rating metric to a credit rating analyst, and I think you'll see as we go through this presentation are a major focus in terms of the county's credit rating. As with your personal finances too, maintaining a savings account in case of a rainy day is also a best practice for a local government. You want to have a savings account there, a rainy day fund, the policy reserve to make sure that there's money there in case something unexpected happens. It's also something that is recommended by the Government Finance Officers Association, GFOA, which is considered sort of industry standard. The third item that they look at is management. So they look at the strength of the management team, the formalized policies, budgeting assumptions, looking for structurally balanced budgets, meaning that reoccurring revenues match reoccurring expenditures. They want regular budget reviews, long-term financial and capital plans. The county has done very well in this category historically, so no concerns there. In terms of long-term liabilities, that's the last category that they look at. They look at your how much debt you have outstanding, both compared to adopted policies as well as other AAA peers to make sure that you're not over leveraged. The rating agencies also look at your pension and OPEB liabilities because they want to make sure that the county is being proactive in meeting its long-term obligations to reduce any future financial pressure.
OPEB, can you
Yeah.
define?
Oh, yes, other post-employment benefits. So basically healthcare benefits for retirees.
Thank you.
Sorry. Yep, of course. So, if you're the one point I want to make is, sort of similar to personal finances, to make sure if your reserves are declining, you don't want to necessarily increase your leverage position, your debt position, because that's going to increase your your annual costs. So you want to make sure that those are in line, and we want to make sure that they're also in line with other AAA peers. So those really the finances and the long-term liabilities are what the county will need to focus on moving forward. This slide here is just a peer comparison. It's pulled from Moody's Investor Service, which has the most comprehensive database out of the 3 national rating agencies. You can see here, I'm mostly going to focus on Maryland. There are 10 triple AAA counties. And Howard is one of them. You can see at the top right who the other AAA peer group is. I will say that this peer group has changed a little bit. Prince George's County was originally a AAA, but last May was downgraded to AA1 by Moody's. So they fell off of this. And then Queen Anne's County actually received a AAA from Moody's last fall. So they came on to this list. So the list has changed a little bit from last year. As you might know, that both the state and Prince George's County were downgraded by Moody's from AAA to AA1 last year. Both of them had been put on negative outlook the prior year in 2024. And it was primarily driven by their own credit metrics. And we'll talk a little bit more about those later. Here on this slide, this is just an overview of the rating reports from last year. While the rating agencies noted mostly strengths, I wanted to note that all 3 did highlight that reserves were a point of rating pressure if they were to continue declining in the future. And so you can see this here, Moody's put out a marker decline in fund balance below 20% of revenues. Fitch put 10% of spending, and then S&P had a more generic that, if reserves were to drop to levels no longer commensurate with similarly rated peers, then they could take negative rating action. I will say that we have experience, we cover a majority of the counties in the state of Maryland. The metrics that Moody's has put out there, they can change those. So the county is currently going through the rating process now. That 20% could be increased potentially during this next rating process. So we're waiting to see. Those are not static benchmarks. They are moving. They are decided by a rating committee on an annual basis.
And once more, if you can provide another definition for the committee.
Sure.
Fund balance.
Fund balance is your reserves. So available reserves. Moody's looks at all funds. So they look at all governmental funds and enterprise funds. The other 2 just look at the general fund, but it's really your committed, assigned, and unassigned fund balance within those funds.
And how would that be reflected on our current balance sheet?
So you would see that on in your balance sheet at the bottom, you will see an overview of your fund balance, and it will be, I think, 5 categories: non-spendable, restricted, committed, assigned, and unassigned. And I am not an accountant, so if I get this wrong, please feel free to jump in, anyone from finance.
I'll
But
cover it in my session, I thought, if you don't mind. There's
Thank
going to
yes,
be
that's
a
fine.
slide on the share.
I don't want to steal Refuse thunder.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm just going to talk a little bit more about reserves and show a comparison against some other AAA peers. So these reserve metrics are pulled from Moody's. These are the available reserves calculated. And as I said, they calculate them across all funds, which includes governmental, enterprise, and internal service funds. And you can see that Howard County, both in fiscal 24 and 25, remain well below the state and national peer medians. The county's reserve levels are only higher than Baltimore County and Montgomery County. And maintaining, reserves above 25%, while Moody's has put a metric out of 20%, 25% will be important, in helping the county maintain its AAA rating. Falling below that 25% ratio would actually result in Howard County having the lowest reserve levels, and I think put more pressure on the county in terms of, negative pressure on the county's rating. Oh, sorry, Todd, I think you have a question.
Yeah, I'll put my hand down, but yes.
No.
So I just want to make sure then, is fund balance synonymous with reserve levels?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Thank you.
Yep. And so with the county's reserve levels being lower than the majority of the other AAA peers in the state, I wanted to just sort of go back and talk about the importance of reserves in credit ratings. So as I mentioned, the state of Maryland was downgraded, and they were in May, and as I had said, they put on negative outlook in May of 24. But that was due to, economic and financial underperformance. There had been a lot of scrutiny on, the use of their rainy day reserves, and their reserves compared to other states. So that was a driver of that rating downgrade. Same with Prince George's County. They were recently downgraded also in May of 25. And it was due to fund balance and liquidity levels that were out of line with peers in the AAA category. Their debt also was above average compared to their peers as well. And so those were the two main rating drivers for Prince George's County. And then Baltimore County has had a history of being on and off of negative outlook. And really their narrowed financial position during those times and plans to take on additional debt. And you'll see that their debt position currently is really the reserves and debt have really driven that negative outlook, and why I'm noting that those are the two metrics that the county will need to watch going forward. So just to talk a little bit more about long-term liabilities. So outstanding debt, so that's how much debt the county has issued compared to your full value or your tax base size. And this really shows, can I borrow this debt? The higher that this percentage is, the less flexibility there is to issue additional debt. And so, you can see here that while the county's full value debt to full value has remained stable over the last year, it still remains above the Maryland AAA county median and all Maryland counties except for Baltimore County. So something just to think about as you plan for the CIP going forward. Sorry, trying to get it to change. And here is debt service to revenues. So this is a measure of debt affordability. Can I afford this? So the county's debt service to revenues is the highest among its peers. However, this debt metric has declined over the last year, so that is positive. And it continues to remain below the industry standard of 10%. So the rating agencies like to sort of see this below 10%. And so the county continues to remain, below that, but still above, the peer median. As I sort of mentioned, just continuing to monitor upcoming debt issuance to ensure that, debt affordability remains manageable will be important. And then this is my last slide. So this talks about those other post-employment benefits and then what we call fixed cost. And fixed costs are just your debt service plus your OPEB contribution plus your other post-employment benefit contribution. Those are items that you have to pay each year. So they're considered fixed costs and something that the rating agencies look at to determine, the greater the fixed cost percentage of your budget, the less flexibility you have. So just taking a look at OPEB first, I pulled the funded ratio for each of the triple AAA counties in Maryland, just to see, how well funded the OPEB plans were. And you can see that Howard is second lowest. So you want a higher number here, and well below the 65.8% median. However, I know the county has been committed to continue funding the trust, and I think that continued commitment will be important to help get this funded ratio up. So I think the progress that the county has made has been good, and I think continuing to do that and focus on funding this liability will be important in the credit rating. And then in terms of the fixed cost ratio, as I talked about, that's debt service, pension contributions, and then OPEB contributions. And you can see that the county fixed cost at 7.8 is below the AAA median of 8.2. So a lower number is better. A lower number signifies more flexibility. So the county is in a very good position here on the lower half of its AAA peers. So just continuing to manage these obligations will be important, going forward. So with that, as I said, I just wanted to give you a little bit of overview of, particularly reserves, and then these long-term liabilities which will be the long-term rating drivers of the county's rating going forward. But happy to answer any questions about any of the slides or any of the information I presented.
Thank you very much, Jen. It's open to questions. If anybody have one, you can either raise your hand or just unmute yourself. Thank you.
I'll ask another question if I might.
Yeah, of course.
Just making sure that I'm quantifying issues $100 million in new debt, and it's double A plus rather than triple A, and there's a 5 basis point differential. You're talking about $50,000 in additional interest expense per year for that $100 million, correct? Give or take. I mean, I know it's amortizing and it changes,
Give or take.
but
Yeah.
5 basis points against $100 million is $50,000, right?
I believe so.
If the reduction is 5, or if the increase in interest is 5 basis points and you issue $100 million, you're paying an extra $50,000 a year in interest, correct?
Yes, correct. Yep.
Yes, what I'm trying to do is
Yeah.
kind of quantify it for everyone to understand, because we talk about these things without quantifying, and I think it's important to make sure that we recognize what the numbers are as opposed to the percentages.
No, you're correct. But yeah, and I think yes, for that one issuance, I guess as you move forward though, like that would continue to build. So it wouldn't just be sort of like a one-time, hit, it would be the debt as you move forward. And as I mentioned before, as the market changes, the spread there can also change. So if it
Right.
widens, that 50,000 could become more. If it lessens, it could become less.
Right. Understand. And for the
Yeah,
benefit, again, for the benefit of the committee, it has no impact on existing issuances. Those are already issued and those terms are established, but
that's correct.
it,
Yeah,
def- it does specifically relate to new issuances.
correct.
Okay. Yep.
Correct.
Yep.
But it is also on top of the interest we already owe on those prior issuances. So that 100,000, that 50,000 is on top of what we're already paying, and it goes on for 20 years. So
Yes.
Right, because every piece of debt is going to be usually financed at 20 years, so that's going to be with us, and also every future years more likely. I think as what FA financial advisor explained that once you drop out the first group, it's very difficult to come back. And the other
Mhm.
thing is, it's not just interest payment difference that was of concern why the credit rating everybody's going after. It's also because this is kind of a third party, more independent assessment from the industry to look at the county's long-term sustainability. They're obvious, they'll come from the investor's viewpoint to assess your long-term risk on that. But to do that, they'll try to see what is your economic growth potential, what's your long-term management, what is your long-term financial control, to say when people invest in you, they have the highest confidence, not only for today, but for like 10 years, 20 days down the road, you are one of the best in terms of lower risk, more likely you will be able to pay them back. So that part is a really important indicator. And at this point, it's very restrictive. It's only a very small group of jurisdictions are able to get that. And it is a really almost like financial health and long-term sustainability indicator. Like once you get out of that group, it has a lot of implications beyond just like how much you save every year from debt. So I just want to clarify for folks not familiar with this.
Just to add to what Harley just said, once you lose that AAA, it's not just the debt that we issue, it equally influences every financing opportunities that we have. Because now every creditor look at us as a high risk because we've dropped. So which means something happened. So we have a line of credit, which I'll be talking about, that will go up. The loans we get, you've heard me talk about, that is really low interest. All that changes because the reason we are getting all of that is because they see us as a low risk. So that's what credit rating does for you when you have AAA. So it changes how people look at you, and of course now the revenue we get now is being squeezed by the debt service and interest payments we are making.
Any other questions?
All right. I think
Okay.
you did terrific job. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, I'm sorry. I think someone has a.
Oh, sorry.
Jackie. Yeah, Jackie, you have a question? Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate this presentation. I just had a question about, since Howard County and the surrounding, well, the counties around the district are heavily dependent on federal government employment. How significant is the decline in federal government employees going to impact the county?
Yes, that's something that all three rating agencies are watching, and certainly a topic that came up in the recent credit rating calls. I think, to date, they're particularly looking at income tax performance and unemployment rates. So far, income tax, I know Holly has mentioned that income tax came in above what was expected in November. So it's tracking ahead of budget in fiscal 26. So I think that was positive, but that's something that they're going to continue to look at. And if there are financial pressures, caused by the federal reductions, that could, potentially put pressure on local governments. But they'll also be looking at how those local governments are adjusting, their budgets and sort of adjusting to any revenue declines that could potentially happen.
So is that major employment a major part of the issue with PG County and the state, that we've been hit by those federal government changes?
I think that played a small part, but both of those credits were put on negative outlook for their fundamental credit aspects first in 24 before any of these federal reductions happened. So the primary rating drivers for why they were downgraded were certainly, their reserve levels and higher long-term liabilities. But, in both of the reports, they did mention, the pressure that the federal reductions could cause on them. But, the initial negative pressure was really driven by their own, reserve and long-term liability metrics being below peers.
So if you're a county or state that maybe does more to help folks and is willing to go into its reserve, then they get penalized, basically.
Potentially, if your reserves fall below the peers. As I said, particularly for Howard County, with the spending that has occurred in fiscal 25 and fiscal 24 and 25, and I know there's plans use of reserves for 26, they're going to be watching those reserves and the trend and how they compare to peers going forward. If they fall out of line, then yes, there could be negative pressure.
Could I ask a question too? In
course.
line with the downgrade for the state, and
Yes.
and past actions passed more what were state obligations onto the counties, which already happened last year
Yeah.
in terms of pensions, and talk in this session of that happening and the increased pressure on the state having been downgraded.
Yes.
This is something we have to pay particular attention to, because that will have an impact long term, but also immediate on funding operating costs within the budget. I just wanted to make sure. Okay.
Yes, that is correct. And something also that the rating agencies asked about in the most recent rating calls. And it's not just Howard County that they're asking these questions to, it is across the board. So they are asking about the federal implications and the state pushing down costs to all of the Maryland counties. And so that is a consistent conversation that we're having with the rating agencies. And
to recognize that part of that is the impact of the state's downgrade and it costing them more to do the business that they have. So to understand that all these things are connected.
They're connected, yes.
It can seem to be a long way away. And so the deficits that the state is wrestling with, and the continued impact for Key Bridge and those kinds of things, which impact the entire state. Those are things we have to keep an eye on. So just wanted to just give us another flag to pay attention to.
Yes.
Jennifer, I think you said there's 10 Maryland jurisdictions that have triple.
Yeah.
Of the roughly 50 or 55 nationwide, right?
Yeah.
And so how many of the remaining 40 some are in Virginia, the two states most impacted by federal issues?
Oh,
do we know that?
I don't know off the top of my head. I know there's a number of them, but I can pull that information and send that over to you. That's not a problem.
I'm just curious. Are the triples all kind of located around the federal government in Maryland and Virginia, and therefore most of the triples are at risk to federal issues as compared to everywhere else in the country?
Jen, are you there?
We lost your audio there.
Yeah. I wouldn't say all of them are centered around at the DC area. There are quite a few in the Midwest as well. But the key here is that I think Fairfax and Loudoun County are AAA, those I know, but they are equally very close to DC, but they are a very affluent county as well. So Jen, did you hear the question? I know you're back. We lost you for a minute. Okay, I think she's having technical issues.
Yeah,
But
locked up.
there are quite a few, 54, she said. Virginia doesn't, I don't know how many they have, but we can just certainly get that before the last next week. So we can share that with the committee, how many AAA are within Virginia. I think that would be key too.
But
I know Dr. Clinch has a question.
oh,
Yeah, how for Prince George's County, how long does it take to go from warning to downgrade? Like how long were they under review? Is it like overnight or is it like a multi-year process?
I think I'll let if Jen comes back when she'll have the specific. I think they were on negative watch for 2 years.
2 years.
Before
So
the downgrade, yes. So at times it could be 1 year. It depends. Again, when they go to committee, the issues, they can change their mind. They give us the 4 categories that they look at, but they equally have their final say on how they look at some of those criteria. But I think Prince George's County, if I'm not mistaken, were there for 2 years.
So typically, a jurisdiction would have some period of time to remediate the issues from a credit. I mean, because I'm kind of assuming we're going to face something in the near future. So, but we'd have time to fix it.
Yes, normally you have time to address, yes, the issues. If I recall, during sequestration years ago, I'm sure you all were aware, when the federal government was put on a watch because they couldn't get their act together, Moody's equally called and put us on negative watch. And I recall we invited him to come in and explain why what was happening in DC was affecting us. And they said just our proximity. But again, we were able to demonstrate that we can withstand whatever comes from DC and that we can pivot when the economic conditions no longer are in favor of our revenue base. And that really spoke a lot. And so I think we were there for about a year. And so when we went to rating next year and sequestration was over, they took us off negative watch.
Thank you so much.
I found something like quickly to address Todd's question earlier about other AAA counties. It looks like spread it over 36, 37 states across the United States. It's really well spread. Some states does have a little more counties rated AAA, but it's really across all the states. Yeah.
I think as Maryland needs to be very proud because we are a small state and we have 10. Sorry, Ellen.
No. I was going to say, okay, so that's in for a small state. That's pretty impressive, and I do think that Todd's sort of on the right pick in that we have been buoyed and protected by the fact that we have the federal presence and that steadiness. And so that's helped us through some harder times because we could depend on that when things were not happening like that in Michigan or someplace else. So it's something to keep in mind that's why they're going to be looking at us more carefully because we are going to be more impacted by whatever actions are happening now. But it is, yes, it is a mark of good management.
What has really worked mainly in our favor in terms of our proximity to the federal government is that we're very close to Fort Meade, where they have the security, the cyber, NSA, and all that helps because most of the time when there are issues with the feds, that is protected. because our national security is always a priority. So that has helped us a lot. And of course, we do let the rating agencies know that while we are close to DC, the area that is more kind of prevalent to us is kind of insulated somewhat. And we equally, I think one of the key things that the rating agencies are looking for is that you are not over-reliant on the feds. So we focus more on their first criteria, economy, because I think that's the key, and which is why I think all of you are here, is what are we doing to grow our economy? Because when you grow the economy, you grow your tax base, and we keep our housing value up. So all of that goes into play in what we're doing. I think Dr. Clinchu talked about the revenue base, the income, so all of that is what we look at. And we are proud to say that most of the federal folks that lives in our county are the senior managers within their respective departments. So which goes a long way in creating value for us. But yes, we are close to DC. That is both a blessing and a curse at the same time. So Jenny, I don't know if you're back now.
I am back. Yes, thank you.
So
Sorry about that.
Does the state downgrade directly, well, indirectly, clearly it would, but does it have a direct impact on how the rating agencies view it, the subordinate political subdivisions in the state? I mean, because the state as a whole obviously benefits from the federal relationship, and then the individual counties benefit as well. But is there a lesson in the state downgrade that the political subdivisions beneath it need to take?
I mean, right now, obviously, there's no linkage, because if there was, then there would have been, downgrades as a result of, the state downgrade if they viewed a linkage between the state and the subordinates. So right now, they are still rating, the counties and the municipalities on their own. I think, in terms of lessons learned, I think, what we already sort of talked about, just making sure that particularly reserve and long-term liability metrics continue to be in line with other AAA peers. The states were not in line with other AAA states and hadn't been for a long time. So I think, that was, aside from the federal government, those were the primary rating drivers for that. I think, in terms of the counties and the municipalities in Maryland, they're going to continue to look at how, those local governments continue to manage, especially with anything the state continues to push down to the counties, and any impacts that these jurisdictions can feel from the reductions in the federal workforce. So they're going to be monitoring that on an ongoing basis.
So this is Barb. Glenn follows on to our discussion, Jennifer, and Todd's last question. So talked about the interconnectivity of setting the rating in all the different parts, including the federal government, the state's downgrade, even the Key Bridge. I was just wondering if we quantify, if the agencies quantify, is there more data? Is there a spreadsheet where they actually have quantified a numeric on some of these other connectivities? Is there more to look at? And Todd, you just answered Todd's question, saying there's no real direct linkage from the state on the rating. So maybe there is no such quantitative analysis. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Nothing that they've actually, put out there. If they have something internally, possibly, but nothing that they've issued publicly at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Jackie, I think your hands are raised. Do you have another question?
Yes, I have another question. Thank you. I'm wondering, as I understand that states like, I believe it's Florida, they pass a lot of their responsibilities on to their local municipalities. Like they don't take care of their state the way that we do. How does as Maryland starts to pass more of the responsibility, the operating responsibilities on to the counties, where do we stand? Because I'm wondering, how unusual it is? And are we becoming more like some other kinds of states? Just trying to get an idea, because I'm trying to make sense of, is this something that's unusual and that Maryland is an outlier, or is it joining the rest of, a group of peers that operate in a certain way?
Yeah. I mean, I don't have an exact, number of states, but I think, if a state is feeling pressure, if they can push down costs to, the local governments, that's, an easy way to sort of take off some of the fiscal responsibility that they are feeling. I think it doesn't, you know, in terms of them doing that, I think it will be very important as to how the counties manage those additional costs. Obviously the state is lessening their fiscal burden, which is, a positive from, their rating standpoint, but how the counties handle and absorb these additional costs, which obviously is going to, limit financial flexibility, is going to be a primary rating driver. And making sure that, these costs are being, reoccurring revenues match reoccurring expenditures, that you have a structurally balanced budget. That's what they want to say. And as a AAA government, they expect that AAA governments will, produce a structurally balanced budget, will be able to find a way to absorb these costs. And so that's what sort of the threshold that the rating agencies will be looking at going forward.
Thank you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right, great discussion. Thank you so much.
Yeah, sorry I got kicked off. I apologize.
Thank you. These are all great, great topics here. So thanks everyone also. All right, thank you, Jen. So next will be Rafi. Go ahead.
All right. You want me to share?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Can you all see my screen now?
Yeah, we can see it. Are you
Okay.
able to make it the full screen? Or
Yes, I'm gonna make it a slide.
yeah,
See
perfect.
better
Thank
now?
you. Yeah,
Okay.
thanks.
Well, good morning all again. Thank you for the wonderful conversation that we've had. Some of that will be equally seen here. So what we hope to cover today is to look at our current debt management policies, our debt measure projections, and of course the bond authorization process, and then spend the last few slides on authorized but on issue bonds. So, and I know Jen of Davenport covered the rating agency, so we took all of the credit rating stuff out of our presentation because that has been covered by Davenport. But there are three key points that are key for us. One is that we received the AAA from all three agencies now, AAA for 28 consecutive years, which is a huge accomplishment. And so we're very proud of that. So we want to at least do everything to maintain it. And our main objectives are two. One is, of course, maintaining the AAA, and two, to continue to maintain the rainy day fund and policy reserve. As you heard from Jen, the reserve are the key to your rating. Even though they look at other criteria, but the number one main criteria is your reserve. How are you spending that? And we do hear lots of questions and concerns from the rating agencies, which we've done a great job of addressing. Because they all normally ask how we use our reserve, because the charter requires us to use it for one-time expenses, and that has been the goal. That hasn't changed. And So they ask, what is the kind of the flow? Where is our float? That depends on the amount of reserve we have. And so that is something that we spend time in making sure that we analyze and maintain. And the last point is that for a $150 million bond sale, I think if you're a AAA, you save over $1 million for the life of the bond. And I think Todd mentioned the 100 million is about 50,000. So if you look at that for 20 years, there you go. So we try to make sure that we maintain our AAA so that we are not spending too much on interest payment for our capital projects. So the main criteria here is a fund balance. And I think Todd, you asked what the categories are. Number one is, of course, non-spendable. I know we reversed that. We put the committed, which is rainy day fund first, but normally it's the non-spendable that is first. There are 5. The non-spendable means these are all tied to your assets, which is your infrastructures, the asset that we have. And so they are of value, but they can't spend it unless you dispose of them. The second highest is the restricted, because that comes because that is tied to a third party, like grants and all. And so general fund normally doesn't have any restricted funds. The next will be committed. Committed is our rainy day fund that is by charter requirement, that is governed by our policies within the county. And of course, the rainy day fund is in our charter, it's 7%. And so that's key that we have that in there. And then we have the assigned. The assigned is what we plan to use our reserve for in the next year or a couple of years. And then, of course, the unassigned is the money we have that is the county can dip into to do whatever is available. Any projects, one-time expenditures that we might embark upon. So if you look at this is a 10-year projection that we provided here. In 2016, you can see it was our total fund balance was approximately 14%. So it was fluctuating because all of them were all the rating agencies' criteria were within 10% or so requirement. But that jumped for almost all of them around 2019 and all. So that's where we tried to meet all of them. I think Fitch was at S&P was at 1.17%, but they are now 10, and Fitch is anything over 5%. But Moody's went to 35%. And so the only time we've made that 35% requirement was in 2023. And for last year, it was down to 32. And one of their concerns was they will watch that, and if it gets close to 20%, that might mean a negative, they might have to reconsider, it might have a negative impact in what they release in all their reports. And of course, this year, FY25, that number has equally dropped, but we are not at the 20%, but that is a red flag for us that we need to watch. How are we going to keep maintaining this to make sure that we are not closer to 20%? And I think we've had our calls with them. We don't have a rating yet, so they are going to committee. But some of the questions did come up. Are we spending our pay-go? And how do we plan to spend in the future years? And that depends on if we are able to generate surpluses. But the goal is to keep our fund balance way above 20%. So that doesn't become a question, because right now we fall within the AA, not the AAA. And so I think our prudent financial management is one of the key that keeps us as a AAA.
Rafael, before you go past that slide,
sure.
Couple questions actually. One is, can you further clarify the difference between assigned and unassigned, number one, and number two? I'm just looking at this. It seems like the final column, which is 630.25, everything above the total fund balance adds up to it, but that doesn't seem to be the case as you look at the left-hand columns of this same chart. If you look at 63016, for example, the numbers above the blue total fund balance line don't add up to the total fund balance.
You are right. Yeah, we'll take a look at that. Yes, you are right. I'm seeing it now.
So somewhere in this chart, there's a bust in that at sum command. In Excel, it seems to me, if this is just pulled off an Excel spreadsheet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it
Uh,
looks like it's all the way through 18, by the way,
yes.
or actually through
I think,
19.
yes, I think
Yeah,
we
right.
missed,
That's right, Steve. Yeah, yeah.
yes. We missed all
Anyway,
the assignment.
I mean,
Yes, I'll make sure we add that. Yes.
that's a long way in the rearview mirror, so I'm not overly concerned about it, but I'm just pointing that out. But I am concerned, or not concerned, but looking for some additional clarification on what does it mean to be, what do each of these categories actually mean? Rainy day fund versus assigned versus unassigned.
So, for the committed, that means the county council took action at the request of the county executive through the budget process. So that is committed. So rainy day is a charter requirement. So that is the countywide policy. For restricted, that comes from a third party, another body, like grants, loans that we get. If we're getting grants or foundation grants, those are governed by another party. They give us restriction, and so that is how we get the restricted. For the assigned, that comes as a recommendation through the budget process to the council that this is what we plan to spend our assigned money for. We're assigning them for future use. And so that is done as an assignment, but everything has to go through, for you to spend that, it has to go through the legislative process. So which means we have to file legislation through the council, voted upon, and then signed into law by the county executive. So for the unassigned, that is kind of your savings. It's just there. So it could be spent on whatever the county chooses to do. But it equally goes through the legislative process. So we're saying for now, for this year, we have $37 million or approximately 38. That now can go through the project process of saying, this is what we want to spend some of that for, or we're not spending it. But for the $254 million, they've been assigned to something that we plan to spend it on. And so that's the difference. But all of them still go through the legislative process before it is spent.
So if I look at 63024 versus 25, $90 million reduction in the assigned category. Is that all? I mean, is that pay-go? What is that? How did we spend $90 million in the past year?
It's pay-go. That was true. If you look at our budget for that for FY25, that number was in there. That we're going to spend approximately, I think, $114 million is what we had in the budget, but we ended up spending 90 in total through our pay-go funding. So that's the reduction. So that's how it happened. So for this year now, for 25, as at the end, we have 254. We equally plan to spend, I think, approximately $80-something million in the budget for this year. And so at the end of this fiscal year, we'll see how much we actually end up spending. The county has done a fantastic job of planning for pay-go because it's one time, and we've always come slightly lower than what we've planned to spend. And the reason for that is that if our revenue exceeds our projected projections, we don't spend all of the pay-go funding. We use those current revenue that are over. Go ahead.
So as that assigned category started to creep up beginning in 20, 21, 22, that was because we decided not to spend pay-go, and it's just beginning in 25 that we decided we're going to. Pardon?
No, Yeah, no, not necessarily. If you look from 20 to 21, those were the pandemic years. And if you recall, we all said we are going to lose revenue. That's what everybody projected. Hence the stimulus package, the CARES Act, and all of the stimulus the federal put in. Federal government pushed to all states and local government. So that revenue, we didn't see, with that influx of revenue, we did not see any revenue shortfall. Because one, the market was still doing okay. And so we earned money, and the income tax did not drop as we anticipated because of people not going to work. So all of that revenue was unexpected because we planned that for the next 2-3 years, there will be revenue shortfalls. We did not experience any revenue shortfall because we had huge stimulus. So the economy was still growing. And so we had these huge surpluses that we are now spending down as projects commence. Don't forget, we equally, capital project is key. We spend, capital project takes about 2 to 4 years to complete because the beginning is that it has to be approved before we start any project commence. So it takes about up to 4 years, which is what the law allows funding authorized bonds to be, and including PAYGO. So if we have PAYGO assigned to a capital project, it might take us up to 4 years to fully spend it.
So we basically, if I can summarize, then we got healthy on the back of inaccurate projections post-COVID, or COVID and close post-COVID. But in the past year, we've made policy decisions that have drawn down our reserves by $100 million in our PAYGO spending.
Yes, and just when we use PAYGO, I didn't mention that earlier. We are saving money of issuing bonds. So which means we are saying we are spending our cash because we have that, so we don't have to carry debt for the next 20 years. So it's a combination which it goes into our capital planning, and Harley and the team do a job of making sure that we work with all our departments, all our project managers, to ascertain all the projects that we have and determine which one we want to issue bonds, because now we are committed for 20 years paying debt service and interest payment, as opposed to using PAYGO. So we're trying to make sure that we are prudent in how we spend the money, using PAYGO funding to reduce the debt capacity. So as you can see from what Jen presented earlier, we're closer to that 10% threshold, whereas our peers within the county, within the state, are slightly lower. So using PAYGO to augment our debt capacity helps to bring us under that 10% threshold that we have in our debt policy.
Yeah, so it's like a balancing act between using PAYGO, which reduces your it brings down this percentage down to 27%, where the metric is 35, but it then improves your ratio with respect to debt service coverage ratio.
Yes, which are both criteria that the rating agencies look at. So on one end, we are looking at our reserve going down, and then our debt capacity going up. So it is it is a balancing act. But the key here is that we always every year review how we spend our PAYGO, because I think that is key for us.
But one more thing, just so I'm clear on how this column moves. So at the end of 24, we had 343,556,000 in basically PAYGO, and then we had additional PAYGO that would have accumulated between 24 and 25, and we spent and we reduced our PAYGO by 90 million. So does that mean we spent 150 million in PAYGO?
No, we spent $90 million in PAYGO. What I'm saying is that the surpluses, the revenue increases we got in FY25, if they are meant for projects and the revenue comes in, we now make a determination. Do we need to transfer the PAYGO funding? Or do we, because if you transfer the PAYGO funding, then the surplus goes back to the reserve. So it's kind of an accounting process. So you could say
Right.
we spend 114. Yeah. Go ahead.
All I'm saying is if we're producing PAYGO in a year because we underestimate revenue, then it's last year's balance plus the additional PAYGO minus PAYGO spending is what should result in the next year's balance, right?
Yes, you are
Yeah,
correct.
likely
Yes,
so, yes.
yes, you are accurate.
So when I
wouldn't
see
say we
it go down,
Go ahead.
when I see it go down by 90 million between 24 and 25, it doesn't mean we spent 90. It means we spent at least 90 because we've undershot and produced PAYGO every year, as Holly discussed a couple of meetings ago, because we've undershot our revenue estimates, producing more PAYGO. So it's not just
Yes.
343 minus 254 is equal to the PAYGO drawdown for the year. It's something more than that.
That's
Exactly.
correct. That's a
Yes.
net change, as you said. Like it's a.
Yes. Okay.
Because
Okay,
I
I
think
It's a
in
understand.
one
net
year,
of,
I think 190
Go
or
ahead.
some million was actually used, but then we bring more revenue to offset partially, so it still have a net.
Right.
to that.
Understand.
That's what
Yeah.
happens. Yeah.
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 I just
So
wanted to understand the mechanics of it. Got it.
yes,
And as a
I wouldn't
review,
say we're
go ahead.
undershooting our revenue projection. I would say we are being prudent because as you heard from some of the presentation, the only one that we are sure and can estimate to a degree of, I would say 90 to 95 to 99% is property taxes. All
Right.
the others have a lot of uh, variables that we can't control, like income tax, the economy, capital gains tax that we talk about. We don't know what that is, which is another thing that we look at when we do our investments. We don't know what it's going to be because that is dependent on the federal rates. And so they tell us they're going to have 4 cuts in a year, and then the economy is not looking good and they only have 1 or 2. That does influence how much we make. But we are projecting a year ahead. So that makes it, I think it's important for us to be more conservative as possible. Because if you miss it on the other end and you have a deficit, now we have a major problem, which is not where you want to be. Because if you're in a hole and you've promised to provide funding for everyone, and now we are, say, $50 million shortfall, that can affect any of the component units because that isn't going to go to them. So that's going to be coming from a small portion of the budget to fill that gap. And then it's going to have huge impact on the following year. I would say that really the primary reason why we need to make sure that we understand all those revenue sources that we are not, we don't have any major control over.
This is Brian Hall. Thank you for the presentation. I've got 2 quick questions, I think quick. One is, where can we see what the assigned fund balance is assigned to? Is that in the AFFOR somewhere, or where would we see that?
Is in the AFFOR. Yeah. If I'm not mistaken, is about page, I think 100 or something. Check that and I'll let you know. Yes,
Yeah, it's an AFFOR. Yeah.
It's note number
Everything
12.
we're showing now is all in the financial statements. And so
Okay.
all our so Angie, go ahead. Which page?
No, I was just saying it's note number 12 in the AFFOR.
Number 12. Okay, thank you. And my other question is, I heard from both you and the presenter today this expectation of the rating agencies to have reserves in the 20% or 30% or higher range. And then I also heard you say that we've had this AAA rating for 28 years, which is phenomenal. And as I look at the chart here, looking back into 16, 17, 18, the reserves were significantly lower than 20%. And so has that expectation changed from the rating agencies, or can you just kind of talk about how that has played with our reserves and then our, ratings, and how that has those two have affected each other over the last 10 years?
Yes, the rating change, especially in 2022, and I think I mentioned that earlier. It used to be almost all of them were all under 20%. Way back in, I think, 2022 or further back. But in 2022, I think Fitch changes to 5% or greater. S&P changes to 10% or greater. But all of them went down. But Moody's went to 35% or greater. So that changes. And so, and of course, when they grade us, I would say last year and this year, if you look at just the pure metric that they use, we're a AA. So what are they looking for? And that's where how we manage our finances, how we can pivot, all of that comes into what they're looking at to say, okay, but you can't be closer to 20% because the more you get closer to 20%, now your risk is now very high. And then when they look at our debt capacity as well, they say you are closer to 10%, which means you have no flexibility if anything drastic happens. So like Todd mentioned, that's the balancing act that we try to manage. Yes, their methodology changes, and it changes. We don't control how their methodology, their criteria goes, so they can change at any time, and they'll publish it. But there's a lot that goes into it, and I know when last year when Moody's changed with their methodology again, they spoke to us. We met with them and they explained what their methodology was and how they were looking at it. And of course, when you look at all of that, you could see 35% was their criteria. We haven't met it. So one of the things we're looking at is that what can we do? We have to now make sure that we don't fall short in all the other categories, because if you do, that put pressure on all of us and on them going to committee to say, you're so close and we have nothing but to put you on the watch. And that's kind of a precursor to you now getting close to a downgrade, which we try to avoid.
Right. Okay. Thank you. That's helpful. Yeah. 35% just seems really high because to your point earlier, it means that we need to take, the county needs to take on more debt if we're not spending down our reserves, and 35%, but that's interesting that they've actually changed over the past several years what their expectation is. Thank you.
Yes. As you can see, if you look at some counties in Maryland, like Jen showed us in our presentation, there are quite a few who are like Frederick County is 70%. That's what they have. And there are quite a few Midwestern counties that are over 65%. And that's what their charter requires. And so it's tough when you are looking at 35%, say that's too high. And then you look at quite a few of these other AAA counties that are way over 50%. So it's tough. So they probably, those are some of the stuff they look at. We don't know how they come up with their criteria. All we know is that we're doing our best to make sure that we try to meet all their criteria and meet their methodology and still remain a AAA. Thank you. All right. Still have a few couple of slides to cover. This is mainly a rainy day a fund, and I think this is required by the county charter, and it's at 7%. And what happened was that in 2017, when some of their methodology was changing, and because almost all of them were at 10%, we realized that rainy day fund, no longer for just general fund, wasn't enough as a AAA. So the county created a policy reserve of 3% to help push that up. And so, and of course, we met the 10% just by increasing the policy reserve, which now gives us the 7 plus 3 to give us a 10%. And then Moody's changed. So Moody's now way over 35%. So we don't have a way of meeting that. But one of the main points we want to state here is that the county has never touched the rainy day fund, even when during the recession, blizzards, floods, everything, we've never touched it. And one of the questions that we keep asking all the rating agencies is that rainy day fund is supposed to be when you are going through financial stress. And if you do touch it, what happens? And they've all been very mute about telling us what will happen. All that they say is that if you touch it, it may impact your rating. And so, which means they want us to keep our powder dry. But we've never touched it since the county, as long as I can remember. So some of the criteria that we look at in terms of our debt affordability measure, number one is that it's debt as a percentage of our assessable base. And I think our policy requirement is 4.8% of our assessed value, especially for our real and personal property. But you can see our assessable base as of June of last year was over $67 billion, and that the debt ratio is 1.8%, way under the 4.8%. So that is one of the criteria that they equally look at. So we are on this level, we are meeting that threshold, way under. So again, for future years, which we equally demonstrate from 2026 through 2035, you can see that number should be going down as our accessible base go up. And so, but what we've done in our accessible base here is that we've included an annual debt issuance of $90 million. So, and at a rate of 4.5%. I know one of the questions that I've been asked in the past was, if we are issuing under 4%, why are we using 4.5? I can tell you last year, we're closer to over 4 or 4.5. So again, this gives us the flexibility that we want to make sure that we are projecting accurately, and that the hope is that we never hit the 4.5% interest rate. But if we are close to 4 now, and we lose our AAA, we are now at AA, and 5 basis points. So before you know it, we are pushing closer to that. And so that's what we're trying to make sure we maintain. But this debt measure number one, we are way under. For debt measure number two that we currently have, this is no longer considered by the rating agencies, but it's still in our debt policy, which we are currently reviewing to make sure that we try to review it every so often. And the last time we did was that no changes were required, but we're probably going to be looking again in depth to see if we need to make changes to our debt policy. But we do believe that knowing the debt per capita to our household is critical for us as a measuring tool. And you can see this last year for 2025, the debt per capita is $3,755 per household. So, but we want to make sure we measure that. And for debt affordability measure number 3, which is a limit of 10%, which is consistent with all AAA. But most of the credit is no longer using this rating again, which is a debt per capita, to be 10%. They used this earlier, but they've stopped using it now. They changed our methodology. But we still use it because we want to make sure that we're not closer to that 10% at all. And so for FY25, we ended up at 3.68%. And for the final debt measure that we look at, number 4, which is a self-imposed policy of keeping our debt policy under 10%. The rating agencies do look at this because it's in our policy. And you see, for 2021, we were over the 10%. And I think I've explained this in the past. The reason was the huge debt that we issued for that year, which was our courthouse. And so, and one of the criteria one of the questions that was asked then was, what is the plan to bring it under our policy? And we did demonstrate what would happen, that we're going to come down to making sure that we are way under that. And so that was kind of a red flag. But we did tell them before we issued the bonds, because we wanted them to know that we are going to exceed it. And so and they were aware, and we had a plan of how we're going to break it down. We have. So currently we are at 9.5% under the 10%. But again, you can see the median in the state of Maryland of AAA Maryland around 6%. So we're pushing our debt capacity closer to that 10%.
Rafael,
yeah. Yes.
Back to that one, just for 1 second, if possible. So we actually experienced a revenue reduction from 24 to 25 of $50 million.
Yes.
Because I don't recall that, but you would know.
Yes, it was. Yes, and that was one of the reasons that we plugged our hole with our paygo. Yes, we did have a reduction because I think our income tax came slightly lower.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. And so for future years, we anticipate to definitely be under the 10%. Again, we are using a $90 million issuance every year for this. And now we're going to go to the last couple of slides, which will address our bond authorization and issuance process. As you all know, the bond authorization happens through the capital budget process, which is voted in May. And so when those bonds are authorized, that's when the project now can actually commence. Because if there are bonds that are assigned to those projects, now we start looking at the spend down. But it is critical that every bond are assigned specifically to projects. So it's not like we have a huge bond that is issued and then we assign it to project. No, they are assigned right from the get-go through the budget process. So it's the public and it's transparent through the legislative process on which project is going to get bond funding. And when we do get authorization through the legislative process, it is on for 4 years, because that's how long it takes us to spend down a capital project. And then, of course, one of the things that we've done effectively well is that we don't issue bonds because a bond has been authorized for a project. We issue bonds to reimburse the county for the money that we've spent so far. And that does a couple of things for the county. One, it takes us, because we try, our goal is to issue tax exempt bonds, which is equally lower. That's why we fight for our rating. For tax exempt, which means the investors who buy our bonds do not have to pay taxes on those bonds. So I always look at that in a couple of ways. One, if you issue bonds and you invest those proceeds, because if you're issuing $50 million, you're not going to put it in your account. If you do, you expect to earn some income. And so you want to always set up a separate escrow account where you have those bonds. But now let's look at it that for the next 3 years, how are you spending that down? And if you're earning income and you don't finish spending it in 3 years, there's what they call arbitrage. Arbitrage issue comes in, which is they want a portion of the income you earn, the interest income you earn of those bonds. So the county avoids all of that disclosure by only issuing bonds to reimburse ourselves. So, of course, when bonds are authorized, we anticipate that only 20% of the authorized bonds is actually issued every year. So how do we avoid those arbitrary issues that I just mentioned? One, the county has a short-term line of credit, which we call the bond anticipation notes. So you're going to hear bonds. So it's called the full definition of the acronym is bond anticipation notes. So it's approved by IRS. It's a short-term funding that we have, just like having a line of credit, which is exactly what it is. So our line of credit is $150 million. So when project commence, what we do is that every quarter, we try to draw down from this line of credit for projects that have been assigned bond authorization. So we draw down based on that. But a lot of work goes into assigning using this line of credit. So every quarter we meet my team meets with project managers to make sure that they truly want to issue bonds on this project. Because what we don't want is a project that is not going to move forward after we've issued bonds, because that has a whole lot of legal issues. So we spend time in looking at it. So bond counsel at times gets involved just to make sure before we draw down that we've met all of the threshold that is required by IRS and of course our both all the code, both state and our code. And once all of that is determined, then we then draw down to reimburse ourselves. So we front the money to pay for those quarterly payments that we made on this project. So which goes into another area that we look at, having our surplus cash, how we invest it. We want to make sure we have enough money to pay these expenditures as we incur them, and then of course reimburse ourselves every quarter. So when we do issue bonds, which is between February and March and maybe April at times, that's when we now take down this line of credit. We are anticipating, we've actually drawn approximately about $90 million, slightly over $90 million now from this line of credit. And so when we issue bonds this year, we'll be taking that down to start again from going through the process of drawing down on the line of credit.
So again, to make it clear, then you pay out of pocket, number one, pay expenses out of pocket for project number one. You repay those out of pocket expenses with a quarterly draw on the line of credit, and then you repay the line of credit with an annual draw on the bond issuance.
Yes.
And then what's the current line of credit rate versus the current GO rate?
Is lower. I think it's at 3% right now. But what happened is that we have less than the line of credit, the $150 million line of credit has a rate because that money is available. It's like on demand. So it's available. Yep. So we pay a lower rate to having that available to us. And then once we use it, we now pay, I think it's slightly under 3%. Is what we pay, lower than what we get as a AAA currently. And so we use that instead of issuing bonds and avoiding all of the arbitrage issue with the IRS and the feds. And by using this line of credit, yes, it's lower rate. And we issue this facility for 3 years. I think the IRS regulation is after 3 years, you have to go back out and bid. You can't just have a perpetual line of credit. So we keep it for 3 years. And then, of course, every year we try to see, we try to make sure the contract is flexible enough that if rates go up, our rates do not go up. But they always is tied to the ongoing treasury with a few basis more. So that's how we look at the rates. But every 3 years we go back and then we do an RFP to secure another line of credit. So we have all these major banks, investment banks, who are clamoring to offer us this line of credit. So it comes out to which one is cheaper, because we are AAA. So the AAA equally goes into how we get some of these facilities set up.
Thank you.
That's what I meant earlier when I was answering the question, that if you lose your AAA, all your financing tools becomes more expensive. And now here's our authorized versus issued. So you can see the green bar, everything here is all the authorized. So the green bar is what we've issued. So you can see those line, slightly blue line, that delta, that variance is unissued. That's what has been authorized but have not been issued yet. So you can see we have our total authorized is just slightly over 1.6 billion. But we've issued approximately just slightly over 1.4. So that difference of just under 200 million is what we have as an issue. So we track those. And of course, one of the things I failed to mention in the process as well is that we do deobligate bonds. If you have a project for 4 years and you haven't, we have not issued any bonds, or you've not issued bonds, we go back to the council to reauthorize it for another 4 years. Or we take the bonds capacity out to say they've not spent the bonds and it's 4 years and they no longer need it, which a lot goes into doing that review. And we take that down. And so we obligate the bonds from those projects. And here my final slide is, I think Todd is what we think you were looking for. This is equally, the details is equally on our AFFOR as well. And so here, as at the balance of June 2024, we had kind of outstanding debt of $1.4 billion. So every year we issue. So I think the first line, the first line, the general county bonds, is really the GEO bonds. So you see, we issued new money of over $100 million. We equally refunded $23 million. And then we retired 95. Now, let me explain the refunding part. When we do refunding, the reason for doing refunding mainly for us has always been because we cannot pay lower interest rate on those bonds. So of course, normally it's 10 years before you can actually consider refunding, which is exactly what these were. So you can refund and then save a little on your interest payment. But when you refund it, they now equally are added to your new issue. You are not changing it. We don't change the terms. We don't change the duration. So the terms are the terms. So there are still probably 10 years left on the bonds because they are 20-year bonds. There are only 20 years left, 10 years left. But we are not paying lower interest rate on them. So we are saving a lot. So the net, the savings is really the key for us. And we try to target 3% or more. That's what we have in our policy. It has to be. But for these particular bonds that we refunded, this was slightly under 3%. Why did we refund them? These were the Buy America bonds. So which is BABs, as we call them, Buy American bonds. The reason we changed that was the Feds were giving us some credit, actually sending us checks for, they call it credit, for these bonds that we issue because they were taxable bonds, but they were not giving us credit for them. And so those credit were coming from them because they're getting some of that from the investors that purchased them. But every year they kept reducing it. And last year we realized that they keep talking about muni bonds being eradicated. And then of course, Buy America bonds was being phased out. The credits that they promised us has been dropping. And we wanted to just completely get out of that platform so we are not at the behest of the federal government. And if they take it away, we'll be losing over $200,000 a year in credits that we're no longer getting. So we moved that and then refunded it. And so now we are completely free. We're lucky that last year they did pay us the last credit, but now we are no longer there because those BABs bonds have some huge legal requirements that we had to meet. And the time we refunded it was the last year we could do it. And we found that others were equally getting out. So even though we didn't really, we I think 2.7% in net present value savings, but everyone was leaving because they were afraid that the Feds might decide to eradicate the credit. Now for the next 10 years, we will now be paying over $200,000 in annual payment, which will now impact our budget. So we're able to exit. As for the others, if you see tax increment financing, we've not, there was no new issuance. That includes our downtown TIF and our Annapolis TIF, the two TIFs we've issued in the county. You can see for Ellicott City Safe and Sound, there's really no new debt, but what we are doing is drawing down because we have a line of credit. So when we draw is really when we issue. So we've drawn over $30 million now, which includes the WIFIA loan and the state portion of the WIFIA, which is way under what the rates we are paying is way under what we would have paid as a AAA county. So they are very favorable loans that we took. And You have equally all the long-term financing, certificate of participation. And then, of course, the last line there is the agricultural land preservation program. Bob, this is really for you. We issued we entered an agreement with the new farm this year. So in FY25, that's why you see the 2.6 being in there. So that's how we track all of our the issued bonds. So when we do refund, we show that column, and if there are new money that we've issued, we show it as well, and then we equally show what was retired. And so if you look now, yes, the total debt has gone up, but it hasn't gone up by the entire new money. It has gone up slightly because of the amount of debt that we retire every year since we issue debt on an annual basis. I think that's my last slide. So I'll be happy to answer some of the other questions that are available. And I do have my team here with me. Angie Price is one of my deputies, and John Vu is our bureau chief for cash and debt. So they are all here to answer any more questions.
Thank you, Rafi. Anybody has questions? I do think
I'll
we
jump
covered
in.
quite a bit during
Yeah,
your presentation. Go ahead, Todd.
Lots of numbers, lots of charts. But Rafi, I wouldn't expect recently, but has the county historically refied long-term debt when rates were favorable, and we might have issued like now we're issuing at 4.5%. If rates fall to 2%, would we refi?
No, it takes us. We have to wait for advanced refunding. Was eradicated by the Feds years ago, and I happen to be on the executive board of GFOA. So our goal is to see, can we bring that back? That was key because before, yes, you could do advanced refunding, which means it's under 10 years that you've issued the bonds, and because the rates are more favorable, you could do what we call advanced refunding. But that was a huge revenue shortfall for the Feds, because when you do that, since these are tax-exempt bonds, they are not making money from it anyways, because the investors don't pay any interest on that, and they frown on it. So we don't have advanced refunding, but we still do have refunding, which is 10 years after you've issued your bonds. That's some of the main condition, that after 10 years, the bonds are considered long-term already. So now you can look and see the interest rates are more favorable. And we're equally looking at issuing a series this year for the 2016 bonds that we issued. We're looking at that to see, are we going to get some savings, and does the market conditions allow us to save more? And then if it does, we will definitely be issuing some refunding for the 2026 bonds that are 10 years this year.
Yeah. And does the county have any revenue bonds anymore?
Revenue bonds? No, not that. Yeah, thanks, Angie. No. So I have to think.
I know
for
that.
yeah.
I know we did the Timbers at Troy project for the county back in 1995, and they issued revenue bonds.
Yes.
For that project.
Yes.
I mean, those are long gone, but I'm just curious as to whether or not there are other projects that are eligible for that type of financing, or if there's any need for it anymore.
Every project, I think the reason you actually issue revenue bonds is that you are going to generate enough revenue to pay off those debts, the debt service.
Right.
And most of our projects are either for the public use, and it's tough to actually now have a project that would generate enough revenue to pay the debt service for those revenue, because one, you won't get a AAA rated for it. If you actually rated, you might probably get, if you're lucky, a AA, because they're saying it's tied to revenue, because it's not the full faith and credit of the county. I think that's what I didn't mention when we issue geo bonds. We are putting the county's full faith and credit on the line that we will do everything to pay you. Yeah. So the revenue bonds is really tied to those revenues. So those are other ways of meeting some of the goals that revenue bonds can do now. And so we look at all options when we're reviewing projects. One, we look at is revenue enough to cover it, or can we issue a certificate of participation, which you've seen that we do. That is equally takes the best of both worlds. It allows you to probably put some revenues in there, and equally allows you to fund it through your general fund. But we try to look at everything just to look at what is the project about. If it's for the public use, then the best debt to issue is always geo bonds, because it's lower rate and lower cost.
So in the preceding slide, is there any, or I should say, where is the public-private partnership, the triple P for the courthouse? And are there any other PPP projects on the books right now?
No, that's the only one we have. It's part of the general bonds, because when we do AAA, we did issue a geo bond for them to pay off. And then we have what we call availability payment to the third party that is managing it for the next, I think, over 20 years now. So they issued bonds that we're paying the availability payment for. Then we issued a lump sum payment to them when we took over the building, and then issue bonds for that. So it's part of the geo bonds. We don't have any other P3 right now. But again, I think the workload that goes into P3, just making sure that we understand the benefits for the county is critical. So I think P3 ours has received lots of accolades across the country because of the way we did it. It was within budget, on time, and so far we've been very happy and fortunate with the group that we work with.
Right.
Jackie, I think you have a question. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yes, Todd asked lots of good questions, and then I lose my thoughts. So I want to get it in before my brain, before I forgot my question. So one of the concerns I have as I looked at what you presented is that the county has been very good at being cautious about how it handles its money. But my question is, has it been at the expense of maintenance of capital projects, right? So when from the school system perspective, we've got lots and lots of issues with maintenance, right? And, the county's got, oh, we're doing such a great job, but at the same time, our buildings are falling apart. So, it seems to me that we put more, and I understand the need to be cautious, but at what expense? And when I look at the unassigned savings, why is the county not more willing to use those funds to support projects that are absolutely needed to keep our buildings, in healthy shape?
That's the challenge that we deal with every year. We want to do that, but again, with all the pressure coming from everywhere, with all the needs that we have in the county, it is tough. Yes, when you're looking at systemic maintenance, the county itself equally has a lot of buildings infrastructure that we're struggling to maintain because if we budget for, like you're saying, I know we said conservative budgeting is the best practice. We are not conservative when it comes to property tax. I must say that. That's the only one we actually can be spot on, because we know when the assessment comes up and we know how to calculate that. And if you look at all the financial reports, the last, as far back as you can get, we've been 98, 99% spot on. So the only reason why I said 98, that 2% that we probably are off, or 1%, is as a result of new construction, which comes during the year. So we are spot on, we know what that is. But for the other areas, which Harley can speak better to, it's tough. Because when you look at income tax, we look at, I do make projections for investment income. That's tough. That's tied to market volatility that we don't have control over. Last year, the Fed said we were going to reduce interest rate 4 times. They only reduced it by 2. And we've heard the fight between the Fed chair and the White House, but they only reduced it by 2. So that created more revenue based on what we projected. And this year we're actually making projections. So we don't know what's going to happen with the Fed. Are they going to drop interest rate? Or are they not? Looking at those market conditions, that's why being in this committee is really critical, because I get a lot from Dr. Irani and Dr. Clinch just telling us what they see in the future, but there's no crystal ball to say you're going to be spot on. So we have to be, if we project we're going to make, say, $50 million in income tax, and we end up making 20, now we have a $30 million shortfall, and it's going to happen during the fiscal year. How do we avoid that? So those are issues that you don't want to be, because that will raise red flags for all our rating agencies to say, well, you are now completely out of your comfort zone of your prudent fiscal management. So we do our best job. It is tough. So Holly, I don't know if you have anything to add.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Rafi. And this is a good question. I think it's really difficult trying to balancing everything. So we have 13 minutes left. If you don't mind, I'll start a quick overview for CIP and save some questions for next week. Does that work for everybody? Okay. And I'll try to address some of the questions there. Are you able to see it? Yeah. All right. Just quickly on the capital funding breakdown, I was using FY26 as example. For the county infrastructure, the biggest source of funding are those that we just talked about and PAYGO that directly funded through the county's general fund, and which is general fund is county's main operating budget used to support all kinds of daily services, range from education to public safety, health and human service, public works, etc. On that there. As we just mentioned, general obligation bonds is the biggest part in recent years. We are also authorized or applied and received low interest loans for Alex City. And then also we are using PAYGO when possible to help manage overall debt, but also support critical projects at the same time. Then on top of that, there's also some designated funding. These are restricted for special purpose, like a transfer tax, school surcharge, those are collected and used to support restricted projects on that. And then after that, we have state and federal grants, which is much less because we're still relatively wealthy county, so we don't have that much other funding sources there. So at this stage, we are in the middle of review and form the proposed budget. Just to refresh the timeline there. At this point, we already collected the CIP request from all the agency entities there for FY27. We are working with executive team and try to kind of balance all those needs there and also the affordability to form the executive proposed budget for CIP, which is due to the county council on April 1st. So in the last few years, there are several years on average, we have GO bonds between 78, 79 on average. And then also, but at this point, the request we received currently is essentially more than doubling that. So that's kind of worth a lot of review and see how to address or narrow the gap between what's requested versus what's likely affordable or based on historical level. And PAYGO also, we received a quite sizable request at this point for FY27. And GO bonds, we have talked quite a bit, thanks to our financial advisor and finance department on that. Here's just a bar chart, a historical bar chart to show general obligation bonds and also low interest rate. Low interest bonds there. As you can see that the blue bar is a GO bonds there. In most recent years there, we actually have to pick up some other debt in orange, which is for relatively low interest federal and state loan for Alex City safe and sound. So that's the reason that we are trying to manage the overall, because everything combined, we are still above actually 100 million when you consider everything. The other thing to keep in mind is we also have to keep the overall debt burden at certain level. And as everybody mentioned that a few years ago, it's actually exceeded debt ceiling, and we tried to bring it back. Alex City, I know the question was raised early. This is, as you remember, this is one of the really biggest project taken on by the county following two devastating flash floods in 2018. And for a county of our size, it is really a big undertake, but it's critical. And also it's important to sustain the local residents, business, and also future development on that. So as of last year, the project has received 321 million appropriation. It has different components as listed here. There are like about 1/4 are grants, other are mostly the low interest loans, but also there are some county geo bonds and PAYGO as well on that. So as of November 2025, a most recent presentation from the county project team to the county council was showing the total project cost was estimated at 425 million. Again, we were trying to primarily rely on grants and low interest loans there. So in 27, based on latest report, the team is anticipating 13 million grants and 33 million low interest loans there. In the future, there's still some gap, but to be determined the future fund source on that. But the point is try to use as much as possible outside aid or low interest loans there. Here's just
this. I'm sorry, you're going to go into more detail, but going back to the project cost estimates, we're now at 425. Like 2 years ago, we were at maybe 280, and everybody laughed because we said this is going to end up costing us $500 million, and now we're within 75 million of $500 million.
Yeah, this project cost has been updated multiple times, as you mentioned on there. I think part of the reason is that the county never in the history take on a project like this on that. So even early investigation based on other places there is not necessarily accurate, especially when people actually, the engineering, and when they do the actual design, actual assessment, the number does change quite a bit. And also, as you remember, last few years, several years, the cost has been going up a lot, both building materials as well as the personnel, everything. But again, even that may not be locked, but actually the updated projecting 425 million is a little bit lower than in 26 budget showing. I think at that point it's 430. So it is fine tuning, but at this point I feel like it's probably not likely to have huge changes there. I could be wrong.
Do we still have, I'm sorry, do we have all the rights of way we need to complete the project, or are we still negotiating on that?
I think we're still in the process on that. I'll take the notes and talk to the project managers about that.
Dear Lord.
Yeah, I mean, it's just yeah, it happened. And so it, again, as I said, is a really big undertake on that. It does actually impact overall capacity over the last several years. Here, just the different components. There are 7 sub-projects. There 3 of them are already finished. North Tunnel, which is the biggest component, most costly, they are already in the middle of construction, and that's fully secured in terms of funding. But there's a few other ones, ponds, Maryland Avenue, Calvert, and T1 ponds, they are still in the design stage, and some are pending some future funding. So debt capacity, we already talked quite a bit. This is just a graphic to show where it is on that. And part of the reason, as everybody mentioned, is that a few years ago, it's actually exceeded the debt ceiling on that there. So we have been fairly kind of cautious in terms of trying to bring it down and keep it in line and not exceeding 10%. And it's not just for consideration of debt about credit rating. It's also the fact like these are paid out of general fund operating budget. So if the share becoming a bigger share, that means what's left for the rest of the operating budget for, you know, education, public safety, everything else on that, it's become a smaller share. So that's why, that's another reason that we have to be mindful, because the more the share could be here, the less it will be for everything else there in the operating budget. That's another reason that why we want to be still control the overall debt burden on that there. In recent years, again, because of reserve discussion we had early on fund balance, the county, along with many other jurisdictions there, was able to see more than usual surplus. And in my first briefing to the SAAC this year, there I mentioned that actually based on Urban Institute research there, during the pandemic, post-pandemic, for 3-4 years there, across the United States, the general surplus for state governments there was in double digit, exceed revenue because federal stimulus and some other special situation there. So the county is no exception. So as a result, we have surplus and have been utilized some of the surplus, try to address the high priority needs in capital budget. And there's also some for one-time policy priority in the operating expenditure as well. But that's the reason we were able to use quite some PAYGO in recent years. The issue is that is like unpredictable and not likely to be sustainable. As you can see, it's peaked up and very strong, but then started to trend down. And historically, before pandemic, the county had very limited funding from that to begin with on that. So we're in the process transition a little bit more towards historical level. I mean, we're still on the road on that. And also per everybody discussion, the PAYGO funding can be kept in reserve or can be spent on one-time operating initiative or used on capital project. It's really delicate balance because you try to maintain everything at the same time. PAYGO spending in recent years historically is more priority, especially when we don't have much PAYGO to begin with. And some years we have less than 10 million or less than 20 million available. At that point, road resurfacing is a priority because the nature of the patching is it's usually not eligible for 20-year geo bonds. So as a result, we usually use the PAYGO for that. In recent year, because we were able to have more capacity PAYGO, we want to use to leverage the debt financing and also support priority. We're able to use for Elk Ridge Community College, community center, the school system renovation, and also some other high priority projects there. One thing is actually PAYGO has been helped. One example help offset some other funding sources on the school CIP. And if you can see that this is a total county CIP to the school system in recent years, you can see the trend is have been coming up there. And it's actually in this period of time, some designated resource like a transfer tax school surcharge has been suffering some market downturn, or in some cases, federal impacts on them. For example, I mentioned earlier, school surcharge year-to-date dropped by more than 60%. And transfer tax for 2 years in a row also have double-digit drop, and then a little bit more stabilized currently. But in this period, we were able to use more PAYGO to offset and maintain and even enhance investment to the school system there. So I just want to kind of do a very quick overview because for sake of the time there, if you have questions there, I'll entertain a couple of them. The rest I can continue next week. Thank you.
Thanks, Holly. This question can roll over, but I just want to make sure again that I'm just clear on it. If we hit our budget projection spot on and we're not $1 under or $1 over, any use of PAYGO funds that are on the reserve balance sheet would result in a reduction in those reserves, correct?
Yeah, that is true.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Yeah. Oh, one thing I want to comment on, I forgot to mention that I think it's Jackie that raised a good point, is like the state shift the cost to counties on that there. I cannot comment on how does Maryland compare to other states there, but over the last decade, the state does actually have been shifting more burden to local, both on operating and CIP. On the capital side, if you all remember, when the school team was here, Cornell was mentioning that actually for the school capital project that's eligible state funding, about 10 years ago, the state pays about 61% of the share and local have 39%. As of now, the state share dropped to 50%. The local have been picking up more. That's just like a one example. But on the operating side, if you recall, they shifted more State Department assessment taxation costs to local. They have been shifted teachers' pension to local, and more recently, liability of pension from different education entities to local, and that trend seems to be continued based on governor's proposal. But anyway, like as the state has more tight own fiscal situation, and even rating concerns, they seems to be continue to try to push those to local and kind of create a more burden on local residents, local kind of governments in total, collectively.
Maryland has a pretty expansive role of the state. If you think of a state and local spending as combined, Maryland tends to have a higher share of state. I mean, there's ones that are bigger, there's ones that are different, but it's kind of comparing apples and oranges. But Maryland tends to have a robust level of state spending relative to state and local combined.
Right. Thank you. And by the way, Dr. Clinch, we'll expect your presentation next week. That's always a big ticket item there for the committee. I think it's a good time to look at next week. Next week, we actually have two meetings there. So just refresh your memory on that there. Next Tuesday, Dr. Clinch is going to talk about economic outlook locally and also personal income. And based on that, I will kind of updated revenue forecast and multi-year projections. Both are also what the committee is charged for in terms of making recommendations. But next Friday will be followed with a recommendation discussion. We are trying to host it in person. Anybody cannot make it, we'll offer the virtual opportunity as well, but we would prefer in person if possible. The thought is once we are able to listen and then have form recommendation, then the following week we plan to have no meeting there, so the team can take the limited time to develop draft a report and then bring back at the last week of February for a discussion and a vote if there's any fine tuning at the time to kind of finalize at that point. So that's just a quick heads up. I apologize for rushing it because I'm at the limit of the time. I know a lot of you have your daily jobs here. So just one more question. Anybody else has questions? Chloe?
I'll make one warning, which is that the new government shutdown might not, the state, or excuse me, county personal income data that I used for the forecast, I gave you a preliminary, was supposed to be released on Thursday. I don't know what the current shutdown means for the release of that
Got
data.
it.
So we may be using projections
Preliminary,
based on projections.
Estimate, yeah, I know. Yeah, it's a lot of data issue from the federal in terms of the timing on that. Thank you very much. I think we have very robust, a very good question and good information to digest there. So look forward to see everybody. If you have questions, feel free to bring back when we meet next week. Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Holly. Thanks, Todd.
See you.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.